Hello to the HubLE audience out there. My name is Jonathan Gustafson. I am the co-editor-in-chief of our scientific content at HubLE, and I am joined here today by Deb Veis, who is the editor-in-chief at JBMR+. Deb, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So today we're going to be talking about graphical abstracts. And so for those that don't know, graphical abstracts are something that JBMR Plus are essentially kind of requiring now, I think, for some of your submissions for manuscripts that are coming in. Can you tell us a little bit about graphical abstracts? What are they?
So graphical abstracts are a different way to convey the main point of your study, to give some idea of what your study design was and what your findings were. In a visually engaging and, very importantly, a simple way. They're not meant to be every last detail, but to really give the big picture. What is the punchline of your study?
That sounds awesome. And that sounds like a really great way to be able to communicate the most important or vital aspects of your study, as well as giving that bird's eye view either to the design of your study or what's important. At JBMR Plus, can you tell us a little bit about the process and the history of what kind of started to the development of graphical abstracts and where you are today with your with the publications that you're getting?
So when I took over at the journal about 1.5 years ago, we were looking at what ways could we have to get people to notice the journal more, to engage more with our content, and importantly, in encouraging authors to submit to our journal, how were we going to help them gain recognition for their work? Because of course, we all want to contribute to science overall, and it's really important to have other people read your work. And we all know that, especially in our current online world, visuals are great clickbait. So our table of contents page was looking pretty boring and dry. And we didn't really have a social media presence. So for both of those things, we decided that graphical abstracts would be a great way to just help share our content very broadly.
Excellent. And what a great way to be able to innovate as a journal, to really be able to understand the community and how people are digesting information. Do you require now that all authors that submit to JBMR Plus have a graphical abstract, or is that just a recommendation currently?
Right now, we're just strongly encouraging it, but as we get closer to publication of papers, they get increasing numbers of emails asking them for some sort of graphical material. Depending on the study, sometimes there's a single striking image that works really well, but we try to work with our authors to figure out what it is that is the best advertisement for their work.
Awesome. So you do a little bit of give and take or back and forth with the authors to be able to try and assist them with that process.
Absolutely, we do. Yes.
Oh, awesome. So do we have any examples today that we might be able to walk through at all, or that you'd be willing to walk through with the website that you have at JBMR Plus?
Yeah, so we can go to the JBMR Plus website here. I will share it right now.
Perfect.
And here we are. This is the JBMR Plus website, and we actually have a tab under Contribute that gives some information about submitting a graphical abstract. And we have a nice carousel of different examples of graphical abstracts for different types of studies. This one happens to be a mouse study where the mice were treated in 2 different ways, and it's just at a glance. If all you do is glance at it, you can at least see there are 2 different groups of mice and that there's something different about their bone, and you can read a little bit more about what that is. We also have some examples that get more at a molecular process. This is a cell cycle here that's pretty clear just at a glance, and we have a few molecules in an osteoclast. So again, you just, even at a glance, without looking at all the details, you have a sense of the type of study and what type of information might be coming from it. So, there are really all sorts of different ways to put these together. Some of these, even our examples, might have a few too many words on them.
Sure.
The idea of a graphical abstract is to try to keep the amount of text down, and it's still it's still a work in progress, but there have been studies showing that papers with graphical abstracts get more clicks and more citations online. So I think there is actually scientific evidence showing that people like graphics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see this being extremely beneficial in other ways too, beyond just getting some visibility, say, for your publication. So, for example, when you are going to a conference and you need to present a poster, I often find it very challenging to get really interested in posters that have a lot of text and that are very text heavy. So would you suggest that graphical abstracts would be a really great way to be able to develop some of the images for your posters?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we often want to share as much as possible at a poster because we're so excited about the amount of, often, especially when you're getting to the end of a study, you've done so much work. You really want to share that all with everybody. But I think you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person in the poster session and think about how much detail can you actually consume from how many posters during a poster session. Typically, they're 50, 100, 500 posters at a really large meeting. They're going to be a lot of them, and it's just like clickbait to have a nice, simple model on your poster to attract people to explain your study. And actually, I've found that standing at a poster and trying to present that poster, it's also really nice, even as you're trying to go through some of the more detailed data, to have a really simple graphic to first maybe orient the person you're talking to within 30 seconds or so, and then to be able to go back to it and show how a specific piece of data fits in.
That's really nice. The biggest thing that I think I always struggle with, especially as an early career kind of faculty person is in academia, is also wanting to be able to understand some of the vision and mechanisms for the different projects that I'm trying to start. Is this another approach that you would take in terms of developing a graphical abstract too for your study that you want to develop, not just necessarily trying to describe a study that already has results?
Absolutely. I mean, whenever you are designing a new study, you want to have a hypothesis and then questions about it, right? So with a graphical abstract, you can have a flow diagram with a couple of possible outcomes, perhaps. You can have different aspects of the overall model that are going to be tested within different aims. So you might have a couple of different inputs into a flow that you're going to test, maybe one of them in aim one manipulation in aim one and a different manipulation of the system in aim two, for example. And you can highlight that or explain that very simply. And I think we all tend to overestimate the reader or the listener in all of our presentations that we do. And really, especially maybe especially with grants where you really have no way to find out, you get no direct feedback. If you're in a room talking to somebody, you get feedback from whether their eyes are glazing over and they understand you or whether they're completely lost.
Sure.
And with a grant, you don't have that opportunity. So it's much better, even somebody who's really expert, if they're in an NIH study section, they're reading 10 big grants. So, you want to really orient them to very specifically, what are you thinking about? And distilling it down very simply will really help even an expert then dive in and digest better the more detailed nuances of your study as they read further.
And I think that's such a critical skill to develop, especially for younger investigators who are just starting out in that grant writing process, really trying to develop their ideas. I can speak from firsthand experience with several grants that I've submitted and gotten feedback on that my grants have really suffered from not having a great graphical abstract essentially, or graphical outline of not only my overall study designs, but even just the mechanisms, for example, about which ways are being targeted. Oftentimes I kind of resort to flowcharts, but that are still very wordy. And I think that putting that time and effort in to develop more of the graphics can be really critical to communicate that so clearly, especially for reviewers. Like you said, I didn't even know this process until kind of experience-based, that oftentimes reviewers only spend 10-15 minutes at a time in chunks sometimes to be able to review grants, because they're reviewing so many, they're trying to do their day-to-day jobs, and maybe they're reading it on a flight to a conference or something like that, and will get interrupted oftentimes. So being able to have really easy and clear ways to communicate your science using graphical abstracts sounds like a really great way to be able to put yourself ahead of maybe the next grant that's on their table.
Yeah, and I would say, it certainly will help the reviewer, but I think it can also help you as the grant writer by forcing yourself to really strip down the complexity of your proposal to
Right.
some very simple graphics with a limited number of arrows and a limited amount of text. Meaning you can't have 50 molecules in some complicated pathway, because everybody knows that in one grant you can't possibly look at all. I mean, okay, maybe yes, there are systems approaches and you can see 50 molecules, but you can't really describe
The connections,
100 arrows relating 50 molecules
Sure.
in most cases. So it really helps you figure out where to put your effort and where to put the words.
Right.
How much do you need to explain? Do you really need to get into some details? I think we tend to want to give a very rich background, and sometimes you really get off topic and you give lots of detail about something that is not really relevant. It might be relevant to the last thing you did, but isn't relevant to what you're proposing to do now.
Right.
Same thing sometimes in a publication, you might get your introduction going off into a pretty long tangent on something that's not really relevant to the study at hand.
Right.
So
and that's so critical when you're limited on space, right?
Yep. Forcing yourself to be simple. And even in a journal like at JBMR Plus, we don't have length limits because it's all online. Nevertheless, your reader's attention span is going to be limited.
Sure. No,
so
absolutely.
You really want to, I think it really helps you focus your own mind, and will help you accomplish your own research better, in addition to communicating it better to other people.
And that's, I think, the most critical thing to take away from this, is that it's another innovative way for us to be able to communicate our science in an effective and clear manner. Do you happen to have any great resources or a link or somewhere that we individuals who are looking to learn more about graphical abstracts could potentially reference to?
So at the ASBMR meeting last year, I presented a workshop on graphical abstracts where we talked about some resources to help think about them. We gave some examples of early drafts and more refined drafts, and that can all be found on the ASBMR website. And I think Jonathan can put a link to that.
We'll make sure that we put the link associated with this presentation, with this video, and we'll make sure we have the link available for others so that they can find them. But that's freely available to those who are not ASBMR members, or do they need to be an ASBMR member?
I believe it's available to everyone.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. I've learned a great deal about graphical abstracts. I really appreciate having you. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on or say before we end?
I guess I would end by just saying simpler is better. We always want to put in that one more thing, but really most of the time we're looking at graphical abstracts and they're not very big. You draw them on a full page, maybe a full PowerPoint slide or something like that, but they might appear on somebody's phone in a tweet or as a thumbnail on a journal's webpage. So always try to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's just browsing.
Wonderful advice. And Deb, thank you very much for coming on today and telling us a little bit about graphical abstracts, for telling us about what JBMR Plus has been doing and wanting to be able to enhance communication of scientists. And I've certainly learned a lot, and I know that our community will as well. And we'll make sure to have that link available so that people can learn a little bit more about graphical abstracts and some of the more fine details of how to construct them.
Great. Thanks so much for talking to me, Jonathan.
All right, perfect.